Blessings to you, and thank you for joining me on my channel. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm the Reverend Dr. Marianne Unger, and I was ordained in 2002. So I've been serving churches since then, and prior to that, I was the Director of Christian Education, and I was at Zion's UCC Pottstown for a while, and then Advent Lutheran in West Lawn, Pennsylvania. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about healing. And he said, "Does that really happen?" I explained to him that I had been a member, and still am, of the Order of St. Luke, and we study the healing stories of Jesus in the book of Luke and the other books that go along with some of the healing stories in Luke. And I had a chance to be a chaplain in OSL and a regional director. And I also was invited, my husband and I, by the Hunters to go with them to Houston, Texas, to the Astrodome. And they were having a healing mission there. And we went down on the AstroTurf, on the field, and there were hundreds of people that needed healing, and we were on a healing team. And we were watching people get slain in the spirit as we laid hands on them. And they were just so full of faith that they were miraculously getting healed. I've had some incredible stories. And that's why when I was meeting with my friend, he said, "You have to share." There are too many stories to share in one video, but I would like to at least share one with you when I was the youth director. And I had been there not too long when the pastor passed away. And so I was doing hospital visits. We had an interim minister, but he wasn't there full time. And I was part-time. So I was helping out with the hospital visitations. And I was going to Pottstown Memorial Medical Center to visit a woman named Anna. And she had had gallbladder surgery, and one of the staples let loose. And it went through her entire body. So it damaged her heart, her kidneys, her liver, everything. And I went to visit her, or attempted to visit her 3 times while she was in the hospital. And she was too sick to have any visitors. They wouldn't let me see her. At the time, I was going to a massage therapist. And this massage therapist was very spiritually gifted in the healing ministry. And that's where I got my first exposure as I was getting a massage. When she reached the gallbladder area, I just started to tear up, and the tears would stream down my face. And she asked me what was wrong, and I said, "I've been wanting to visit with this woman named Anna, and she's been too sick for her to move her, and they won't let me see her because she's too sick to have visitors." So she said to me, "We are going to focus a white light on Anna." And we did so, and we prayed for a while. And when I left the massage and went back home, there was a message on my answering machine from Anna's daughter telling me the news that she had improved enough to be able to send her down to a hospital in Philadelphia. So I immediately drove down to Philly and found out what room she was in. I went in to see her, and I went back to the nurse's station. I said, "That's not her." And they assured me that it was her, but she was so filled up with fluid. She had gangrene so bad that you couldn't tell the difference between her cheeks and her nose and her lips. Her face was just that swollen, which is why I didn't recognize her. But I went back in after the nurses assured me that it was her. And in the back of the room, there was her daughter. Well, what had happened on my way to the hospital was, they call it a word of knowledge. I didn't know what it was at the time. It was just feeling a message from God telling me that she was going to completely heal. It's not something I would have prayed for on my own. It was certainly 100% God's words. Otherwise, I never would have shared that kind of prayer with her. So I went into her room and saw that it indeed was her. And I asked her, "Can I pray for you?" She said, "Sure." Now, this was a woman that when I had first started at Zion, she introduced me to everyone in the Sunday school class, and there were at least 80 people in the Sunday school class. So this was a woman that was very much loved, very faithful, very devout Christian. So when I prayed for her, I only used God's words and told her that she was going to completely heal, which I would never do unless it was a word from God. And I left the hospital just trusting in God. And I got a phone call from her daughter several days later. Her function started to come back. So her kidney was no longer in failure. Her heart disease was stopping to affect her heart rhythms. And it was just amazing that seemed like day by day she improved, that in 2 weeks she was out of the hospital, completely recovered from all the organ damage. And within 2 weeks after that, she was back in Sunday school and church. Now, this was a woman in her 80s. So it is amazing what God can do. And we had a wonderful relationship together. When I decided to go get ordained, I had several people at the church that told me I needed to go to seminary. They thought I should become a pastor. So I didn't really think I was smart enough, and being a woman, I didn't think I was supposed to be a pastor, but God kept calling to my heart, and I kept giving him all kinds of excuses. So I thought, okay, well, I'll go for a class in Christian education so I can use that in my youth ministry at Zion's. And I got a 4.0. Took another class in Intro to Spirituality, got a 4.0. Then an advanced class in spirituality, got a 4.0, and realized, okay, I am smart enough to do this. And so as I was working on my classwork, we have to do something called CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education. And we can do it at a hospital or a nursing home or someplace that you get experience in pastoral care before you actually get called to a church. So I was at the Reading Hospital, and at the time, they were doing a study on the efficacy of prayer. So everything was documented, and I was only permitted to go into rooms and pray for people that had asked. So I could go visit anyone, and I had to visit everyone on my rounds. And I could only pray for people that had requested it. So everything was documented. Did they request prayer? Did I pray for them? What was the outcome? There was one woman, I was in ICU, who was in her 90s, and her husband was in his 90s, and everything was failing. He didn't have veins. They were all collapsed, and they couldn't even take any more of his blood. His veins were so bad. And she just cried her eyes out and poured her heart out to me in the hallway. And she said, I can't do this anymore. She said, I can't take care of my own health. My health is failing. I can't stand seeing my husband suffer like this. So we prayed for him that he would be able to go to heaven peacefully. And everyone, with that exception, everyone else walked out of that hospital healed. And in fact, the doctors were so amazed that they started to ask me for a prayer, and the nurses started asking me for prayer. So I was quite busy, and there was a Hispanic couple with their daughter in the ICU. He was in a coma, and she and her daughter were sitting on the floor. Every day I went in to visit. I did this over the summer, and I did something I wasn't supposed to do, but I couldn't get his permission, and they didn't speak English as far as I could tell. So I just said, I want you to know that if you can hear me, you can reach out to Jesus. So it wasn't in prayer language, it was just an invitation. He got healed, and I got in trouble, obviously, because I didn't ask permission. But at that point, I was so thankful that God had answered that prayer. I don't know if he was a Christian or not before he went into the coma, but I know when he came out, he was. There was another man in the hospital who had gone septic, so his blood was in sepsis, and he was in and out of different rooms and procedures and really on the edge of not being able to overcome this. And I visited him probably 5 days in a row. And on the final day of his stay at the hospital, we walked down the hallways of the hospital and just were elated that he was able to leave the hospital healed. And he gave me a gift. He wanted me to hear a song by Mary Mary called Thankful. And I am so thankful that he did, because it's one of my favorite albums now. I bought the album and it's phenomenal. And I think about him whenever I listen to that. And I could tell you so many stories from the hospital and from being a member of the Order of St. Luke, of healing stories that I've witnessed personally. And my friends just want to make sure that other people hear them too. So I'm doing this as a request. And if even one person is helped from it, it will be worth doing. I'm not doing it to make money, but I just want to glorify God. And when we have faith and our faith is increased from this healing, this is what we're doing. We're not looking for glory for ourselves, but we're looking to give God the glory. So it's not me doing this work. My job is to empty myself, not have an agenda, and then listen for God's voice to speak. So usually when I pray, that's how I begin. I begin with just quiet and wait for God to speak to me. So I want to thank you for joining me during this time, and I hope to do more videos to share more important stories. God bless.